The dust had barely settled on the stagecoach that left her standing alone in the middle of nowhere, when Amelia Owens realized she had made a terrible mistake trusting her cousin's promise of employment in San Antonio, Texas. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the empty road, and the only structure visible was a weathered ranch house in the distance, its wooden frame standing defiant against the harsh landscape of 1878. She clutched her single carpetbag tighter, feeling the weight of desperation settle in her chest as she understood that the address her cousin had given her did not exist, that the whole thing had been a cruel joke to get rid of her after her father's debts had consumed everything they owned back in St. Louis. Her boots kicked up small clouds of dirt as she walked toward the ranch, each step feeling heavier than the last. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, dotted with scrub brush and the occasional mesquite tree. She had exactly $3 to her name, no prospects, and nowhere to go. The thought of returning to Missouri filled her with dread, knowing that her father's creditors would be waiting, expecting her to somehow pay what she could never afford. As she approached the property, she noticed the place had a lonely quality to it, well-maintained but lacking the signs of family life. The corral held several horses, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Chickens scratched in a small coop near the house. It was clearly a working ranch, but something about it felt isolated, as though whoever lived here had deliberately chosen solitude. A man emerged from the barn, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty hat that shadowed his face. He stopped when he saw her, his posture shifting from casual to cautious. Amelia straightened her spine, trying to project confidence she did not feel, and continued walking until she stood at a respectful distance from him. "Sir, I apologize for the intrusion," she began, her voice steadier than her hands. "I find myself in unfortunate circumstances. I was told there would be employment waiting for me in San Antonio, but that information proved false. I can see you have a working ranch here, and I am willing to offer my labor in exchange for shelter. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend to chickens, and I am a fast learner for anything else you might need." The man pushed his hat back, revealing a face probably in his late 20s, weathered by sun and wind but handsome in a rugged way. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. Vincent Yates had not expected to find a young woman standing in his yard making such a proposal, and for a long moment he said nothing. "Where did you come from?" he asked finally, his voice deep and rough from disuse. "St. Louis, originally. The stagecoach dropped me about a mile back. I was given an address in San Antonio that does not exist." She swallowed hard, hating the vulnerability in her admission. "I have very little money and no family here to turn to." Vincent looked past her down the road, then back at her face. He could see the exhaustion there, the barely concealed fear, and something else, a stubborn pride that had not yet been broken by her circumstances. He had been alone on this ranch for 3 years, ever since his parents had died from fever, and in that time he had grown accustomed to silence and solitude. The idea of having someone else here, especially a woman, unsettled him. "I do not need anyone working for me," he said, but his voice lacked the firmness of a true rejection. "I manage fine on my own." Amelia felt her heart sink, but she refused to let defeat show on her face. "I understand. I am sorry to have bothered you. Could you perhaps direct me to the nearest town where I might find other opportunities?" "San Antonio is about 8 miles south," he said, gesturing down the road. "But you will not make it before dark, and there are dangers on that road for a woman traveling alone." She nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Stories of bandits and worse traveled even to Missouri. Then I will start walking and hope for the best. Thank you for your time. She turned to leave, and Vincent felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He thought of his mother, who had raised him to be decent, and he thought of his sister, who had married and moved to California, and how he would want someone to help her if she were ever in such circumstances. "Wait," he called out, and Amelia stopped, turning back to face him. "You can stay here. Without earning your place, I mean. I will not put a woman out on the road with night coming on." Amelia blinked, certain she had misheard. "I do not understand. I offered to work." "I heard you, but I am not going to make you work for basic human decency. There is a spare room in the house. You can stay there until you figure out what you want to do next." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "I will not bother you. You have my word on that." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it nearly made her knees weak. "That is incredibly kind of you, sir. I do not know what to say, Vincent Yates, and you do not need to say anything." He gestured toward the house. "Come on. I will show you where you can sleep." She followed him across the yard, taking in more details of the property. Everything was neat and orderly, the work of someone who took pride in his land. The house itself was modest but solid, built to withstand the harsh Texas weather. Vincent opened the front door and led her inside. The interior was sparsely furnished but clean. A large main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table with 2 chairs sat near the window, and a few personal items suggested this was indeed a home, not just a place to sleep. Vincent led her down a short hallway and opened a door to a small bedroom. "This was my sister's room before she married. The sheets are clean. There is a wash basin on the dresser." He pointed to another door across the hall. "That is my room. The privy is out back, and there is a well with good water." Amelia set her carpet bag down on the bed, running her hand over the simple quilt. "Mr. Yates, I truly cannot express how grateful I am. I promise I will not be a burden. I can still help around the house if you will allow it." "Vincent," he corrected again, "and do what you want. I am usually out working the land most of the day anyway." He hesitated in the doorway as though wanting to say something more, then simply nodded and left her alone. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. The terror that had gripped her since discovering her cousin's betrayal began to ease, replaced by bewilderment at this stranger's kindness. Men did not usually offer help without expecting something in return, especially not to women in desperate circumstances. Yet Vincent had seemed almost embarrassed by his own generosity, as though he could not quite believe he was doing it himself. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's Bible on the bedside table. The room smelled faintly of cedar and dust, but it felt safe, and that was more than she had dared hope for an hour ago. That evening, she ventured out to the main room and found Vincent stoking the fire. He looked up when she entered, and she saw a flash of something, surprise, perhaps, or wariness, cross his face before he returned his attention to the flames. "I was going to make some supper," he said. "Nothing fancy, just beans and cornbread. Please let me do that," Amelia offered. "I meant what I said about being able to cook." Vincent straightened, studying her again with those intense blue eyes. "You do not have to, I know, but I would like to. It feels wrong to sit idle when I could be useful." She moved toward the kitchen area before he could protest further, examining the supplies. She found beans already soaking, flour, cornmeal, some salt pork, and a few other staples. It was the kitchen of a man who cooked for survival rather than pleasure, but she could work with it. Vincent watched as she moved around the space with practiced efficiency. building up the fire in the cast iron stove and setting a pot to boil. She worked quietly, and he found himself oddly reluctant to leave the room, even though he had paperwork waiting for him. Instead, he sat at the table and began sorting through the week's receipts from the cattle he had sold in town. "How long have you been running this ranch alone?" Amelia asked as she stirred the pot. 3 years. My parents died and my sister married around the same time. She wanted me to sell and come to California with them, but this land has been in my family for 15 years. I could not just abandon it. That must be lonely, she said softly. Vincent looked up sharply, surprised by her directness. Most people avoided mentioning his solitary existence, as though acknowledging it would be rude. "I am used to it. Being used to something does not make it good." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "I am sorry. That was too forward of me. I have been told I speak my mind too freely." "It is fine." He returned his attention to the papers, but her words lingered in his mind. He had told himself for years that he preferred the solitude, that he did not need the complications of other people in his life. But lately, the silence had begun to feel oppressive rather than peaceful, and he found himself riding into San Antonio more often than necessary, just to hear human voices. They ate supper in relative quiet, though Amelia asked a few polite questions about the ranch and the area. Vincent answered briefly, not accustomed to conversation during meals. But he noticed that her cornbread was significantly better than his own attempts, and the beans had actual flavor instead of being merely edible. "That was very good," he said when he finished, and he meant it. Amelia smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "Thank you. My mother taught me. She said a woman who could cook well would never go hungry because someone would always need feeding." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She died 5 years ago. It has been just my father and me since then, until he passed 6 months ago." The sadness in her voice was palpable. The debts he left behind consumed everything. "I thought my cousin would help, but apparently, family loyalty only extends so far." Vincent felt anger stir at the thought of family abandoning her like that. His own family had been close, supportive, and he could not imagine turning away someone who needed help. That was wrong of them. "Yes, it was. But it led me here, and you have been kinder to me in a few hours than my cousin was in all the years I have known her. So perhaps things happen for reasons we cannot see." After dinner, Amelia insisted on washing the dishes while Vincent went out to check on the animals one last time before bed. When he returned, she had already retreated to her room, and he found himself standing in the empty main room, aware of her presence in the house in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. He lay awake that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in the house, the soft footsteps, the creak of the bed in the other room. He wondered what he had gotten himself into, inviting a stranger to stay. But when he thought about turning her away, about watching her walk down that road alone into the approaching darkness, he knew he had made the only choice he could have lived with. In her room, Amelia also lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Vincent's gruff kindness, the way he had offered help without demands or conditions. She had been raised to be wary of men's intentions, especially men she did not know. But something about Vincent felt different. There was a loneliness in him that matched her own, a sense that they were both people who had lost more than they cared to admit. The next morning, she woke to the sound of Vincent moving around the house. By the time she dressed and emerged, he was already preparing to head out to the range. "There is coffee on the stove," he said, settling his hat on his head. "I will be out most of the day. Help yourself to whatever you need." "Vincent," she said, and he paused at the door. "Thank you again. For everything, he nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude, and left quickly. Amelia poured herself coffee and stood at the window, watching him ride away on a sturdy roan horse. The morning light painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like hope. She spent the day exploring the house and making herself useful despite Vincent's insistence that she did not need to. She found cleaning supplies and scrubbed the kitchen until it shone, washed the windows, swept the floors, and took inventory of the pantry. The house clearly had not seen a woman's touch in years, and while it was not dirty, it had that particular dusty neglect that came from a man living alone and focusing only on the bare necessities. She also found a sewing basket with several shirts that needed mending and set to work on those. The repetitive motion of the needle was soothing, and it gave her time to think about what she would do next. She could not stay here indefinitely, relying on Vincent's charity. But the thought of leaving, of going back out into the uncertain world, filled her with dread. Vincent returned as the sun was setting, dusty and tired. He stopped short when he entered the house, taking in the changes. Everything seemed to shine, and the smell of something delicious cooking filled the air. "What did you do?" he asked, and Amelia could not tell if he was pleased or upset. "I am sorry if I overstepped, I just needed to keep busy." She stirred the pot on the stove, nervous about his reaction. "I made stew for dinner, I hope that is all right." Vincent removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "You did not have to do all this, I know, but I wanted to." "Please do not be angry." "I am not angry." He looked around the room again, and something in his expression softened. "It just took me by surprise. The house has not looked like this since my mother was alive." They fell into a routine over the following days. Vincent would rise early and head out to work the ranch, and Amelia would spend her days cooking, cleaning, and gradually making the house into a real home. She baked bread, tended the chickens, collected eggs, and even started a small vegetable garden near the house. In the evenings, they would eat dinner together, and slowly, Vincent began to talk more. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to work cattle from his father, about the drought that had nearly ruined them 5 years ago and how they had barely held on. She told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her mother's illness, about her father's slow decline after his wife's death, and how the debts had piled up from medical bills, and his attempts to numb the pain with whiskey and gambling. "I tried to stop him," she said one evening, staring into her coffee cup. "But grief does strange things to people. He was not the same man after she died." "I understand that," Vincent said quietly. "When my parents died, I thought about selling everything and just drifting. Nothing seemed to matter for a while. But then I realized that giving up on this place would mean all their work had been for nothing. So I stayed and kept going, even when I did not particularly want to." "What changed?" she asked. "Time, I suppose, and stubbornness." "I am too stubborn to quit, even when quitting would be easier." He looked at her across the table. "You have that same quality. I saw it the first day when you were standing in my yard. You were terrified, but you were not going to show it." Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks at the observation. "I did not think I was that transparent." "You were not. But I have spent a lot of time alone, watching cattle and horses. You learn to read small signs, the way someone holds themselves, the look in their eyes. You were ready to collapse, but you would have walked those 8 miles to San Antonio rather than beg. Is that admirable or foolish? Both, probably. But I respect it." A month passed, and the ranch seemed to come alive in ways Vincent had not experienced in years. Amelia proved to be genuinely talented with the chickens, coaxing more eggs from them than he had managed in months. Her garden began to sprout, promising fresh vegetables. And the house felt warm, lived in, welcoming. But it was more than the physical changes that affected him. It was her presence, the sound of her humming while she worked, the way she smiled when he came home in the evenings, the conversations they shared over dinner. He found himself hurrying through his work so he could return to the house sooner, found himself lingering over meals, reluctant for the evenings to end. He was also acutely aware that he was developing feelings for her, feelings that went beyond simple gratitude for her help or companionship. He noticed the way the lamplight caught in her dark hair, the grace of her movements, the sound of her laughter when something amused her. And that terrified him, because he had no idea if she felt anything similar, or if she simply saw him as the man who had offered her shelter when she had nowhere else to go. Amelia was fighting her own internal battle. She had grown deeply fond of Vincent, appreciating his quiet strength, his dry humor, the kindness he tried to hide beneath gruff practicality. She caught herself watching for his return each evening, felt her heart lift when she heard his horse approaching. But she also feared that her feelings were born of gratitude and proximity, rather than genuine affection, and she worried about what would happen when she eventually had to leave. The situation came to a head on a Saturday morning when Vincent announced he was riding into San Antonio for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked, and Amelia was surprised by the invitation. "You have been stuck out here for over a month. You might want to see something besides this ranch." She agreed eagerly, and they set out together in the wagon. The ride took a few hours, and they talked easily, pointing out landmarks and wildlife along the way. San Antonio was bustling when they arrived, full of people conducting business, shopping, and socializing. Amelia had forgotten what it felt like to be among crowds, and she found herself both excited and a bit overwhelmed. Vincent conducted his business at the general store, the feed store, and the bank while Amelia browsed the shops. She had a little of her own money left and bought some fabric for a new dress and seeds for the garden. As they were loading the wagon to leave, a woman approached them. "Vincent Yates, is that you?" The woman was pretty, probably in her mid-20s, with blonde hair and an expensive dress. "I have not seen you in town in ages." "Hello, Margaret," Vincent said, his tone polite but cool. "How have you been?" "Wonderful. Father just bought another property north of here." Her eyes slid to Amelia, curiosity and something sharper in her gaze. "And who is this?" "This is Amelia Owens. She is staying at my ranch." Vincent offered no further explanation, and Amelia could sense tension in the way he held himself. "How interesting," Margaret said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but appropriate. "I am sure the town will be fascinated to hear that Vincent Yates has a woman living with him." "People can think what they want," Vincent said flatly. "If you will excuse us, we need to get back before dark." He helped Amelia onto the wagon seat and climbed up beside her, snapping the reins to get the horses moving. They rode in silence for a while before Amelia spoke. "I am sorry if my presence is causing problems for you. I did not think about how it might look to others." "I do not care what Margaret Peterson or anyone else thinks," Vincent said, but she could hear the frustration in his voice. "Margaret wanted to marry me 3 years ago. I said no, and she has not forgiven me for it. She would love any excuse to spread gossip." "Why did you say no?" Amelia asked, then immediately regretted the question. "I am sorry. That is none of my business." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "Because I did not love her. She wanted the ranch, wanted security, wanted a husband who met her standards. But there was no warmth there, no real feeling. I figured being alone was better than being with someone who did not truly care about me beyond what I could provide." Amelia understood that sentiment more than he knew. "That makes sense. My father tried to arrange a marriage for me before he died, to a man who owned a store. He was perfectly respectable, but he looked at me like I was inventory he was considering purchasing. I could not do it. What did your father say? He was angry at first, but then he got sick, and it did not matter anymore. She looked out at the passing landscape. I think he understood in the end. He married my mother for love, and even though losing her nearly destroyed him, I do not think he regretted it. They rode on, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of shared values and experiences that drew them closer together. That evening, after dinner, Vincent lingered at the table longer than usual. Amelia could tell something was on his mind, and she waited patiently for him to speak. "I have been thinking," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "You have been here over a month now. I want you to know that you can stay as long as you need to. There is no rush for you to leave." "That is kind of you, but I cannot impose on you indefinitely," Amelia said, though her heart sank at the thought of leaving. "It is not an imposition." He met her eyes, and she saw something vulnerable there. "The truth is, I do not want you to go. This place feels like a home again with you here. I feel like I am living instead of just existing, and I realize that is selfish of me to want you to stay for my sake, but I am asking anyway." Amelia felt her breath catch. "Vincent, I feel the same way. I have been dreading the day when I would have to leave, but I also do not want you to let me stay out of obligation or pity." "It is not that," he said firmly. "Amelia, I care about you, more than I probably should, considering we have only known each other a short time. But I cannot help how I feel." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I care about you too, very much, but I need to know this is real, that it is not just because we are both lonely and I am convenient." Vincent turned his hand to clasp hers. "You are not convenient. You are the first person in years who has made me feel like I matter beyond this ranch and the work I do. When I am with you, I remember there is more to life than surviving. You make me want to actually live again." Tears stung Amelia's eyes. "You have given me hope when I had none. You have shown me kindness I did not know still existed. Being here with you feels right in a way nothing has felt right in a very long time." He stood and moved around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. They stood close, and she could feel the warmth of him, see the hope and fear mingled in his eyes. "I am not good with words," he said quietly, "and I do not know the proper way to do this, but I am asking if you would consider staying here permanently. Not as someone I am helping, but as someone I want to build a life with." "Are you asking me to marry you?" she whispered. "Eventually, if you would want that, but I do not want to rush you or make you feel pressured. I just want you to know my intentions are serious." Amelia felt joy burst through her chest, bright and overwhelming. "Yes, to all of it. Yes, I want to stay. Yes, I would marry you. Yes, to building a life together." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and she wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart. When he pulled back enough to look at her face, she saw everything she felt reflected in his expression. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and she loved that he asked, that even now he was making sure she wanted this. "Please," she said, and he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the taste and feel of each other. Then it deepened, becoming something more passionate, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," she said, laughing a little. "I kept telling myself I was being foolish, that you could not possibly feel the same way. I was terrified you saw me as just the man who gave you shelter," he confessed. "I kept trying to find ways to show you I cared without being too forward or making you uncomfortable. You succeeded. Every kindness, every conversation, every time you came home and your face lit up when you saw me. I felt it. I just was not sure if I was seeing what I wanted to see." They spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, making plans. They decided to marry in the fall, giving Amelia time to prepare and allowing Vincent to make some improvements to the house. He wanted to add another room, maybe two, thinking ahead to the family they both wanted. "I always thought I would have children someday," Vincent said. "But after my parents died, I figured that future was not going to happen. Now I can see it again." "How many do you want?" Amelia asked, curled up beside him on the old sofa his father had built. "As many as we are blessed with. 2, 4, 6. I grew up with just my sister and sometimes I wished for more siblings. What about you?" "I always wanted a large family. Being an only child was lonely, especially after my mother died. I like the idea of a house full of children, noise and chaos and love." As summer progressed, their relationship deepened. They worked together during the day, Vincent teaching Amelia about the ranch and the cattle, Amelia showing Vincent how much better food could taste with a little effort and creativity. They rode together in the evenings, exploring the property and the surrounding land. And they spent long nights talking, kissing, learning each other's hopes and fears and dreams. Vincent took Amelia back to San Antonio in late July to meet with the minister and arrange the wedding. They also stopped at the dressmaker so Amelia could order a proper wedding dress. The woman, Mrs. Chen, was warm and welcoming, asking no uncomfortable questions about their situation. "I am so happy for you both," she said as she measured Amelia. "Vincent is a good man. He deserves someone who will appreciate him." They set the wedding date for the first Saturday in October, when the worst of the summer heat would be past, but before the winter cold set in. Vincent invited the few friends he had in the area, and Amelia wrote to a former neighbor in St. Louis who had been kind to her after her father's death. The months leading up to the wedding were busy. Vincent and a hired hand built the addition to the house, 2 new bedrooms that would serve as children's rooms someday. Amelia sewed curtains, made quilts, and continued improving the garden and the house. They bought a new bed for their future shared room, and Vincent built Amelia a hope chest to store the linens and household items she was preparing. But more than the physical preparations, they were building a foundation for their marriage. They learned to communicate, to work through disagreements, to support each other. Vincent learned that Amelia needed words of affirmation, needed to hear that he loved her and appreciated her. Amelia learned that Vincent showed love through actions, through the way he brought her wildflowers he found on the range, through how he always made sure she had the best portion of meat at dinner, through the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. They also learned about each other's pasts in greater depth. Vincent told her about the guilt he felt over his parents' deaths, how he had been in town when they got sick and always wondered if he could have done something to save them if he had been home. Amelia shared her grief over her father's decline and her own guilt that she had not been able to stop him from destroying himself. "We cannot change the past," Amelia said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "We can only learn from it and try to do better going forward." "I know, but sometimes the weight of it feels heavy." "Then we will carry it together," she said, taking his hand. "That is what partnership means. We share the burden so neither of us has to bear them alone." Vincent brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I love you, Amelia. I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you too, and you do say it. Maybe not always with words, but I hear it in everything you do." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and comfortable temperatures. The ceremony was held at the small church in San Antonio, with about 20 people in attendance. Amelia wore her new dress, a beautiful creation in ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Vincent wore a new suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothing. When Amelia walked down the aisle, Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was radiant, smiling at him with such love and joy that he had to blink back tears. He had never imagined he could be this happy, that life could offer him something this good. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Amelia with all the love he felt, and the small congregation burst into applause. The reception was held at the hotel restaurant, with food and music and dancing. Vincent was not much of a dancer, but he held Amelia and swayed with her, ignoring the other people and focusing only on his wife. His wife. The words felt miraculous. "Happy?" he asked her. "Happier than I have ever been," she said. "I keep thinking about that day I walked up to your ranch, terrified and desperate. I could never have imagined it would lead to this. I am glad you were brave enough to ask for help, and I am glad I was smart enough to say yes." They returned to the ranch that evening, driving the wagon under a sky full of stars. The house welcomed them, warm and glowing with lamplight. Vincent carried Amelia over the threshold, and she laughed with delight. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, both of them nervous but eager. They took their time learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Vincent was gentle and patient, making sure Amelia felt safe and loved. And Amelia gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body and her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking softly in the darkness. "I was so scared it would hurt or be awkward," Amelia admitted. "Was it?" Vincent asked, concerned. "A little awkward at first, but not scary, not with you. It felt right." She traced patterns on his chest. "I am glad I waited for the right person. So am I." He kissed her forehead. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret this. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." They fell into married life with ease, the routines they had established over the summer continuing, but now with added intimacy and permanence. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Amelia's garden produced abundantly, and she began preserving vegetables and fruits for the winter. The chickens thrived, and she even convinced Vincent to let her get a few goats for milk and cheese. Winter came, and with it the occasional cold snap that made them grateful for the solid house and the fireplace. They spent long evenings reading together, working on small projects and talking about the future. Amelia taught Vincent how to play chess using a set she had brought from St. Louis, and he taught her some of the cowboy songs his father had sung. In February, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She waited a few weeks to be certain, then told Vincent one evening after dinner. He stared at her for a long moment, then whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby?" he asked, his face alight with happiness. "Yes. Probably sometime in late September or early October." Vincent set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need to see the doctor? Should you be resting more?" Amelia laughed at his concern. "I am fine. Women have been having babies forever. But yes, we should see the doctor in town soon, just to make sure everything is progressing normally." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Amelia did experience some morning sickness in the early months. Vincent was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried that she was working too hard or not eating enough. She found his concern endearing, even when it became a bit overbearing. They spent the spring and summer preparing for the baby's arrival. Vincent cleaned and painted one of the new rooms, and Amelia sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Friends from town, including Mrs. Chen, the dressmaker, came to visit and brought gifts. Even Margaret Peterson, who had initially been hostile, softened when she saw how happy Vincent and Amelia were together and brought a beautiful cradle as a gift. "I was wrong about you," Margaret admitted to Amelia during the visit. "I thought you were taking advantage of Vincent's good nature. But I can see you genuinely love him, and he is happier than I have ever seen him. I hope we can be friends." "I would like that," Amelia said, appreciating the woman's honesty. Amelia went into labor on a warm evening in late September. Vincent rode hard to fetch the midwife while a neighbor woman who had been visiting stayed with Amelia. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced outside the bedroom door, terrified by every cry of pain he heard. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the strong cry of a newborn baby. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Yates, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but doing well." Vincent entered the room to find Amelia propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Vincent, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost afraid to touch something so small and precious. But when Amelia placed the baby in his arms, he felt a fierce surge of love unlike anything he had ever experienced. The baby had dark hair like his mother, and his eyes, though closed now, would probably be blue like Vincent's. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "You are amazing." "I cannot believe you did this." "We did this," Amelia corrected. "Together." They named him Thomas Victor Yates, Thomas after Vincent's father and Victor to honor the V naming tradition. The baby was fussy and demanding, keeping them both exhausted in the early weeks, but neither minded. Vincent would walk the floor with Thomas at night, singing cowboy songs to soothe him, while Amelia recovered her strength. "I never knew I could function on so little sleep," Vincent said one morning, dark circles under his eyes but a smile on his face. "Neither did I, but somehow we manage." Amelia watched as Vincent held Thomas, rocking him gently. "You are a wonderful father. I hope you know that. I am trying. I keep thinking about my own father and all the things he taught me. I want to be that kind of father for Thomas." As Thomas grew, the house filled with the sounds of his laughter and babbling. He was a happy baby, curious and active. Vincent would take him out to see the horses and cattle, holding him carefully and pointing out different animals. Amelia would sing to him while she worked, and Thomas would watch her with fascinated eyes. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Amelia became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and Vincent was slightly less panicky, though still protective. Their daughter, Annie Rose Yates, arrived in the spring of 1882, smaller than her brother but equally healthy. She had her mother's dark hair and eyes, and from the beginning she was a daddy's girl, always reaching for Vincent. "I think she has you wrapped around her finger already," Amelia teased as Vincent cooed at the baby. "I have no defense against her. She looks at me with those big eyes and I am lost." Thomas, now too, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would bring her toys and pat her head gently, saying "baby" in his sweet toddler voice. Vincent and Amelia watched their children together and felt their hearts overflow with gratitude for the life they had built. The ranch continued to prosper. Vincent expanded the herd and bought more land. Amelia's garden grew larger each year, and she began selling preserves and baked goods in town, contributing to the family income and enjoying the connection to the community. They hired a young hand to help with the heavier work, giving Vincent more time with his family. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch after putting the children to bed, watching the stars come out. "You ever think about that first day?" Amelia asked. "When I showed up desperate and afraid, offering to work for shelter. I think about it often." It was the best day of my life, though I did not know it at the time. Vincent pulled her close. I almost told you no, I almost let you walk away. But you did not. You said I could stay without earning my place here. That one act of kindness changed everything. It changed me. Before you came, I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You brought light back into my life. You gave me a reason to care about more than just surviving. Amelia kissed him softly. And you gave me a home, a family, a future. You showed me that there are still good people in the world, that kindness exists even in the hardest times. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the whisper of wind through the grass. I want more children, Vincent said suddenly. If you do, I love our family and I would love to make it bigger. I want that too, Amelia agreed. This house has room for more love, more laughter, more life. Over the next several years, their family grew. Another son, James, arrived in 1884, followed by twin girls, Emma and Elizabeth, in 1886. The house was full of noise and chaos and joy, exactly as they had both dreamed. Vincent proved to be a patient and loving father, teaching his children about the ranch and about honor and kindness. Amelia was the heart of the home, managing the household with efficiency and filling it with warmth and laughter. The children grew up happy and secure, knowing they were loved. Thomas showed an aptitude for working with horses and would often accompany his father on the range. Annie was clever and curious, always asking questions and wanting to understand how things worked. James was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to outdoor work, but still capable when needed. The twins were mischievous and inseparable, constantly getting into harmless trouble that made their parents laugh even as they tried to discipline them. Vincent and Amelia's love for each other only deepened with time. They had their disagreements, as all couples do, but they had learned to communicate, to listen, to compromise. They made time for each other, stealing quiet moments together even amidst the chaos of raising 5 children. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, talking about their days and their dreams. They still kissed like newlyweds, still found joy in each other's company. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Amelia with a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with trusted neighbors for a few days. They traveled to the Gulf Coast, something Amelia had always wanted to see. They walked on the beach, collected shells, and spent long hours talking and simply being together without the demands of children and ranch work. "Thank you for this," Amelia said as they watched the sunset over the water. "This is wonderful. You deserve it. You work so hard taking care of all of us. I wanted to do something special for you." "Every day with you is special," she said. "Even the hard days, the days when the children are sick or the work is overwhelming. I would not trade this life for anything. Neither would I. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. I cannot imagine my life without you." They returned home refreshed and even more committed to each other and their family. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, by first days of school and graduations, by small triumphs and occasional heartbreaks. Thomas fell in love with a girl from town and married her when he was 22, bringing her to live on the ranch and help with the work. Annie went to teachers' college, something Vincent and Amelia were immensely proud of, and returned to teach at the school in San Antonio. As their children grew and began their own lives, Vincent and Amelia found themselves entering a new phase of their relationship. With the house quieter, they had more time for each other again. They took rides together, explored the land, and talked about dreams they had not had time to pursue while raising 5 children. "I want to travel more," Amelia said one day. "I want to see California and visit your sister." I want to show you St. Louis, even though most of my memories there are difficult. I want to experience more of the world together." "Then we will," Vincent promised. "Thomas can manage the ranch. He has proven himself more than capable. We have worked hard for decades. We deserve to enjoy the fruits of that labor." They made plans to travel the following spring, and they were excited like young lovers planning an adventure. But first, they had another milestone to celebrate, their 25th wedding anniversary. Thomas and his wife, along with Annie and her new husband, James, and the twins, now young women in their own right, planned a party. Friends and neighbors came from all around to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. There were speeches and toasts, dancing and laughter. Vincent and Amelia stood together, surrounded by the life they had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 25 years, Amelia said, looking up at her husband. It has gone by so fast. And yet I can remember every important moment as if it were yesterday. The day you walked into my yard, our first kiss, our wedding, the birth of each of our children, every day has been a gift. Even the hard days, especially the hard days, because we faced them together and came through stronger. As the party continued around them, they stole away for a moment alone, walking to the spot where Amelia had first approached the ranch all those years ago. "I was so scared that day," Amelia remembered. "I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to survive. And then you appeared, this gruff cowboy who offered me shelter without asking for anything in return. You saved my life that day, Vincent. No, you saved mine. I was lost before you came, lonely and going through the motions. You reminded me what it meant to live, to love, to hope. Everything good in my life stems from the moment I decided to let you stay." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, holding hands like they had done countless times over the past 25 years. The sounds of the party drifted to them on the evening breeze, the laughter of their children and grandchildren, the voices of friends celebrating their love. "You have any regrets?" Amelia asked. Vincent considered the question seriously. "I regret that my parents did not get to meet you and see the family we created. I regret that your father did not live to see how strong and capable you became. But about us, about our life together, not a single regret. You are the best decision I ever made. You are mine too. I walked into your life with nothing, and you gave me everything. You gave me love, security, a home, a family. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again." As the years continued to pass, Vincent and Amelia did travel, seeing parts of the country they had only dreamed of. They visited Vincent's sister in California and were delighted to reconnect with her family. They traveled to St. Louis, where Amelia showed Vincent the places of her childhood and made peace with her past. They saw the Rocky Mountains and the great forests of the Pacific Northwest. Each journey brought them closer together, creating new memories to treasure. But they always returned to the ranch, to the home they had built together. It remained the center of their world, even as their children scattered to pursue their own dreams. Thomas and his wife had given them 3 grandchildren, and watching Vincent with those babies reminded Amelia of how he had been with their own children, patient and loving and endlessly gentle. On their 40th anniversary, when they were both in their 60s, they sat on the same porch where they had spent so many evenings throughout their marriage. Vincent's hair was silver now, and Amelia's dark locks had threads of white running through them. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had fallen in love decades earlier. 40 years, Vincent said, shaking his head in wonder. "When did we get so old?" Amelia laughed. "Speak for yourself. I feel young when I am with you." "I know what you mean." Inside, I still feel like that lonely cowboy who was stunned when a beautiful woman appeared in his yard asking for shelter. And I still feel like that terrified girl who could not believe someone would show her kindness without expecting something in return. They sat quietly, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of companionship. Finally, Vincent spoke. If I could go back and give my younger self advice, I would tell him to say yes faster, to not hesitate even for a moment when you asked for help. Because every moment with you has been precious, and I wish I had not wasted even a second of our potential time together. You did not waste anything, Amelia assured him. You gave me exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it. Our timing was perfect. As the sun set on their 40th anniversary, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had shown on so many other important days in their lives, Vincent and Amelia Yates reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first desperate request for shelter to the deep, abiding love that had sustained them through 4 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, they had built something remarkable. Their children had grown into good people, carrying forward the values Vincent and Amelia had instilled in them. Their grandchildren were thriving, some already showing interest in ranch life, others pursuing different paths. The ranch itself had prospered beyond what Vincent had imagined possible in those lonely years before Amelia's arrival. But more than any material success or family legacy, what mattered most was the love they shared. It had started with a simple act of kindness, one lonely cowboy offering shelter to a desperate woman without asking for anything in return. That generosity had blossomed into a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and deep affection. They had faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, raised a family together, and grown old together. "I love you," Vincent said, the words as heartfelt as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," Amelia replied, squeezing his hand. "Always and forever." The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their entire journey together. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family gathered for the anniversary celebration, the voices of their children and grandchildren filling the space with warmth and life. But for this moment, Vincent and Amelia remained on the porch, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a beautiful life together. The ranch that had once been Vincent's lonely domain had transformed into a thriving family home, filled with generations of love. The desperate young woman who had once stood in the dusty yard asking for work in exchange for shelter had become the heart of that home, the center around which everything else revolved. And the lonely cowboy who had offered kindness without conditions had discovered that sometimes the best things in life come from moments of simple human decency. As they finally rose to join their family inside, Vincent held the door for Amelia, just as he had done thousands of times over their 40 years together. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, and in that exchange of glances was a lifetime of love, respect, and gratitude. The story that had begun with an ending, with Amelia at the absolute lowest point of her life, had become a tale of redemption, hope, and enduring love. She had offered to work for shelter, expecting to have to earn her place in the world as she always had. But Vincent had seen her worth immediately and offered something far more valuable than a simple transaction. He had offered acceptance, safety, and eventually, his heart. And in return, she had given him everything he had been missing without realizing it. She had brought warmth to his cold house, purpose to his aimless days, and love to his lonely heart. Together, they had created something neither could have achieved alone: a family, a legacy, and a love story that would be told for generations. As the night deepened, and the celebration continued inside the ranch house. Vincent and Amelia Yates stood together in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from within. Behind them lay 4 decades of shared history, countless memories both joyful and sorrowful, triumphs and challenges that had tested but never broken them. Before them lay whatever time they had remaining, years they would spend together, still learning about each other, still growing, still loving. The lonely cowboy and the desperate woman had found each other on a dusty Texas road in 1878, and from that unlikely meeting had sprung a love that had withstood the test of time. They had built a life on a foundation of kindness and respect, and that foundation had proven strong enough to support everything that followed. As they stepped inside to join their family, closing the door on another day but not on their story, one thing was certain beyond all doubt. Vincent Yates's decision to offer shelter without conditions, to see Amelia Owens as a person deserving of help rather than as someone who had to earn basic human decency, had changed both their lives immeasurably for the better. It had been the beginning of everything good that followed, the single moment that had set in motion a lifetime of love, family, and happiness. And neither of them would have changed a single thing about the journey that had brought them to this perfect moment, surrounded by the people and the life they had created together, still hand in hand after 40 years, still in love, still grateful for that dusty afternoon when fate had brought them together, and one lonely cowboy had made the best decision of his life.